Hey everybody, welcome back. So we're still in the Ruby on Rails course. In this one we're going to install Rails. This one it might not be ideal for me because I already have Rails installed, but we're going to go through it anyways. So if you went through the Ruby course, you have already installed Ruby, but if you haven't done that, then now is the time to install it. If you need Ruby installed before we tackle installing Rails. With Ruby installed, you're all set to install Rails and create your first Rails app. Ensure that everything went smoothly. Before continuing, let's review the best practices to keep in mind. Follow the directions closely and don't skip any sections. Do not use sudo unless the Odin project specifically says to do so. Failing to follow this advice can cause a lot of headaches. In some instances, you might see a message in the terminal telling you to use sudo and/or to install something with apt. Ignore that terminal says and follow the instructions below. Copy and paste the commands to avoid typos. If you stop working on the project partway through and come back to it later, be sure to cd to move back inside the project directories so that the commands will work. In this project, we're going to build a fully functional Rails application. The entire point of the exercise is to make sure that you have everything installed and working completely on your computer. Do not worry if you don't fully understand what you're doing. You'll learn exactly what most of these commands are doing later in the course. For now, go slowly and be sure to follow each and every step closely. If you run into trouble, don't forget you can always reach out for help on Discord. You can also use the Discord search function to check if someone else is having a similar problem. So your first Rails app. So we're going to say, I'm pretty sure that there's nothing troublesome with me just following this. It's just going to tell me I already have Rails installed. So step 1.1. We've previously installed Ruby. Now it's time to install Rails. Gem install Rails. Yeah. And so this should say I already have Rails installed. But we'll probably have a different thing that it says. Okay. Successfully installed Rails. Weird. Rails-V. Maybe it just installed a new version. This should and then rvm/v. rvm list. rvm list shows us the different versions. Cool. It looks like I was actually on Rails. Oh, no, that's Ruby version manager, not Rails version manager. It doesn't matter. Okay, so we should have Rails-V. We've got that now, so 7.0.3. Cool. Step 1.2, installing Yarn. So you maybe wonder why we're installing Yarn when Rails 7 provides import maps that allow you to import JavaScript modules directly from the browser. We will go over import maps in a later session, but it is important to note that import maps handles libraries without transpiling or bundling and uses the asset pipeline. You still need to install Yarn to ensure frameworks that require compiling or bundling can still be used. This is due to the way some JavaScript is bundled, requiring the usage of Yarn. Wow. This is actually something I'm not really great at. I wish I understood what that actually meant more. JavaScript libraries used to be managed through the asset pipeline in previous Rails versions, but as JavaScript progressed, it became a little dated and made it hard to integrate the latest JavaScript libraries to the framework. Yarn is a JavaScript package manager, so it's like NPM, much like Bundler for Ruby, and allows you to easily manage your JavaScript libraries for the frameworks that do require bundling and compiling. So visit the Yarn download page, and from the drop-down, choose your operating system you're using. It will then present you with instructions on how to install Yarn. You can verify the install by using this one. Okay, cool. So we go to Yarn, install Yarn. It's recommended to install Yarn through NPM Package Manager, which comes bundled with Node.js when you install it on your system. Alternatives. Let's see here. Let's go Mac OS version, classic stable. Yep. Oh, let's do brew install Yarn. That seems quite easy. And since we're using Homebrew, that seems like the best way. Cool, I'll close that. And we'll be able to check the version there. And until that loads, I'm just going to continue kind of dealing with this. So, we're going to create an application. This is where you might start to be difficult to follow what's happening. If you don't understand what's going on, just double check that you're typing the correct commands in. Cool. And now we should go yarn -- version. And nothing. Great. Pouring. Yarn requires a node installation to function. You can install one with brew installed node. Okay, cool. So this is an important part of setting these things up, and this is why I'm happy to do this course with a brand new computer, is because most developers will already have nodes set up, and so this is the kind of things that new developers will be going through. So we're just going to copy that. It tells us exactly what to do. And I don't have Node installed on this computer, which is pretty interesting. If I go Control Tab, Node-V, I would have thought that that was built into one of these computers. So yeah, this is probably going to take a real long time, so I might cut the video here. Because after this installation, we are going to create the application. So we'll just fast forward this. Okay, great. It looks like everything worked out correctly. So now we could go Node-V, and that should give us a version. Cool. So now we have Node on there. So we could run Node. We could do JavaScript stuff, which we don't need to do right now at all. Yeah, so we can exit that. This is completely not necessary. Ignore I said that. Okay, so now we can check our yarn -- version. We're going to say no, now there's yarn. Yarn was installed automatically with Node. Interesting. So we don't need to install yarn now. So let's create an application. So it says this is where you might start to be difficult to follow. Okay, we already did that. You're going to start by navigating to the directory that house your projects in, then telling Rails to initialize the project on it. Okay, so I'm going to change directories onto the desktop because I'm going to build this all on the desktop. I only have 2 folders on there, so it's Life and Useful Programmer. I'm just going to keep those there for now. And then, so we'll just make dir, and I'm going to call this one. I'm actually going to do this a little different. I'm going to call this the Odin project. No. We're going to make this easy. I'm just going to make this yeah. Okay, so cool. It says change directories to your Odin project directory. So I'm going to say Odin project directory. Okay, now if we were to list what out there, we see that we have the Odin project directory here. And that's great. So now we're going to change directories so that we're in there. And you see that it says change directories here. So I hope that doesn't come as a surprise. If we were to PWD, you can see it's in the desktop and in the Odin directory. And we're going to say Rails new, and then my first Rails app. And this is going to do a bunch of stuff. And if you look through here, it's kind of useful to see. It's created a README, a rake file, a Ruby version. This is actually a great thing to trace if you're looking at a Rails app. If I was looking at a brand new Rails app that I was about to work on, I would literally follow this as a way to, and read through the files in this pattern as a way to understand what's actually happening. You can see that the Git repository gets created. It creates views for layouts, assets for images, and then there's a bin rake, and a lot of this stuff is not going to make sense to new programmers, so I'm not going to go over it. Test files, and then it's going to install a bunch of these different Ruby gems. And it's going to add all that stuff together. And so now if we were to list here, we're going to see my first Rails app there. And that's great. So this will do a bunch of things. In the above process, Rails creates a new directory for us. Where does it do the new directory? Okay, cool. Import stimulus, whatever. In the above process, Rails creates a new directory. Let's CD into it now. So we can change directories into my first Rails app. And you can use the tab button to make it quick. Yeah. Let's see here. Now you're going to tell Rails to generate some templates for us. This will get us up and running in no time at all. If you're using Ruby 2.7, to check, you can go Ruby -V. We're using 3 or higher, then you may see some deprecation warnings that look like errors in the console. Ruby made some changes in version 2.7 to deprecate using hashes or whatever. You can read about it here. Don't worry about that. That's a rabbit hole. If you do see any deprecation, we'll take time to update the gems. If you do see any deprecations, don't worry. They will get fixed eventually. Yeah, you got to remember Rails is a moving project. It's being developed all the time. The warnings will look something like this. Okay, so run the following command. Okay, cool. So this is a great introductory Rails scaffolding generation. So we say Rails, we're generating a scaffold which has it's called a car, and it's got a make, which has the character of a string in it, a model, which is a string, and a year, which is an integer. And that's going to just build up a bunch of things. And let's go code dot here just now so we can be paying more attention to this as we go. Yes, I trust the author. Get rid of this get started thing. So what just happened there when we ran that? It built app views cars, index show underscore car. So here we can say app controllers. Now we have a cars controller. We're going to have a views controller for cars, which is all of these different files. And that is all built with Scaffold. And so now we need to migrate the database, which for Rails developers, this is a very basic thing to do. It basically makes it so that the way active storage interacts with your database, don't worry about that for now. And now we can start the server. Yeah, okay. And so here in the server, we can go Rails S, and the server should start. And so it says it's listening on port 1300. And so for short, you can go localhost 3000, and you've got your first Rails server running. Oh, and it says you wants us to go to cars, and I think we should get a routing error. Cool, added the route in there. Nice, resources for cars. Cool. You can see your application. If you're using a VM, you will need to open the browser inside, whatever. Go ahead and create a new car, and then refresh the page. New car. BMW. 350. 2022. Create car. Cool. And now you've got your car. So now you've created something in your database. Back to cars. You see that you've got a car here. You could create another one, like Benz. Model E-Class. Year 2022. And then you can say back to cars, and now you see you've got two cars. So you're literally already adding to your database, and that's pretty interesting. Create a new car and then refresh to verify it's working. Add as many cars as you'd like. When you're satisfied, go to the terminals and stop the terminal. So we can come over here, and in our terminal I press Control-C, and that stops the terminal. And if we were to refresh now, it would say it wasn't there. So our server stopped running, and so therefore we couldn't receive the data on our local machine. Okay, cool. So now we're going to do some Git groundwork. Like all projects you've done so far, we need to use Git for our version control to push our app to different remotes. So stage and commit local changes. So if we were to go to Git status right now, and I'm just going to move this up so it's not being blocked by my weird face. Git status, we see all of this stuff needs to be added. And so now we can say git add, and now if we do git status, you'll see it's all green, which means that it's staged. Commits changes to be committed, and then we want to commit it. So git commit -m, and we're going to go initial commit and git. Okay, cool. So now if we were to go to git status, we'd see we're on branch nothing to what? On branch nothing to commit. Oh, that's because we haven't pushed yet. Okay. So now we want to initialize on GitHub, add the remote, and push. Make a repo on GitHub, and make sure you do not initialize the repository with the README because the things, whatever. Remember, do not enter this. Oh, cool. So this is actually where they're starting to do that. So we need to go to GitHub and say independent. Oh no, I.A. Robinson. And this will get us to my GitHub portfolio. And here I'm going to click. You want to go to yours, obviously. New repository. And do they have anything? Do they care about what we do here? No. Rails. Test app. This all stuff doesn't really matter. We can make it private or public. Add a README. Creating a private repository. My guess is that it's not letting me in because it's not allowed there. All this stuff can be changed. Template. We don't really want that. Oh, selecting the owner. Okay, that would be the problem for me. You guys probably didn't have that problem if you've only got one. So we can run this one. Cool. And now, yeah. Well, the instructions say to do this, but I can just say do this one. So git remote add origin. That's actually what they're saying. Git remote add origin and then the SSH for it. So if you actually come down here and you see it says push an existing repository from the command line, you can just paste this in there, and that adds for your local machine the remote one, and then we can get the branch for main, and we push to the main branch. Okay, cool. So this will take a little bit, but probably not long. Now that that's complete, if I refresh this page, we'll see that we've got a new Rails up. So that's pretty exciting. It even has a README on there, and that was all generated by Rails. So if I were to go Command P and type in a README, then I could go straight to this thing, and you'd see that that matches what is on GitHub. Cool. Confirm Git is working. Confirm that your push was successful. You should see all your folders. Yeah, the key to here is that you need to refresh. This marks the start of your Rails journey. Later on, you'll be able to look back at this repository and marvel at how far you've come. Deploy your Rails application. Okay. Now, this might be a complete failure because we might have to pay for it, and I just don't want to do that because this app is not important yet. You created your Rails application. It's time to deploy. This process will allow you to send a link to people. Recall in the previous lesson, we have set up a Heroku account, deploy account. First run Heroku create. We're going to pull up the thing again. Heroku create. Cool. And it's given it this quiet forest. This is default behavior for Heroku. So now we can say git remote. I think that'll show us. Cool. So now we've got origin and Heroku. So this will be useful to understand. Verify that you see Heroku in the output, so we see it. Prepare Rails for Heroku. Heroku uses a slightly different setup than what we have on our machine. We need to configure our application to do that way. So configure a gem file. To deploy a Rails application, we need to change some settings. First, we need to open the gem file and edit it. So I'm going to close that terminal, Command P, and I'm going to go gem file. In your terminal, type ls and verify you see a gem file in the output. If you don't see it, navigate. Then we'll use Visual Studio Code to modify the gem file. So we press code dot. We already did that previously. But if you wanted to do that, you just go code dot and enter that. I'm not going to do that right now because this is Visual Code. When it opens, you should see a list on the left side of the screen. Click gem file and then delete the line that says gem SQL. So it wants us to delete this line. And then replace this. Okay, so notice what's going on here. This is your default gems that go whether you're in production or test or development. So here, what we want to do is move. So here we have development and test. So development and test, we want to add the gem SQL here. So gem SQL Lite 3. And because it's using double quotes in here, I want to use double quotes. And then in production, which it doesn't have here. So that's kind of an interesting little tricky part. It doesn't have that. So we need to do Droop, create it new, production, do gem, PG, and cool, and we save this. Now you have to save the file. You can leave VS Code open since we're going to be coming back to it for the next one. And so install the new gem. Might as well just do it this way. We need to tell Ruby, Git, and Heroku that we changed the gem file. Yeah. When we deploy the app, Heroku will install the gems in the production group and ignore the ones in the development and test group. Conversely, we don't need to install the gems in the production group on our local machine, since they aren't being used for development. To accomplish this, we need to tell Bundler to ignore production group gems in this project by running this one. Okay, cool. It might have been easier just to make the general database in the gem file Heroku or Postgres, but that's out of the scope here. So we're not just saving disk space here. We also need to use this because the Postgres gem relies on having PostgreSQL installed locally. Without it, the gem can't build the native extensions needed to interact with the database, and we would need the gem to error. Using the same database in both development and production is something we would definitely recommend, but not at this stage. SQLite database is much easier to get up and running for the development, but SQLite isn't supported on Heroku, and we need to use Postgres instead of production. This is all very accurate. Now we can install the only gems in the development and test groups on our local machine. Okay, so this is a very common bundle install. We'll be using that all the time with Rails apps. Yeah, so we want to configure our root. Now, let's close that for now. And so we want to go back to VS Code and expand the config folder file, and instead on the left side, on the files inside the folder be named roots. Okay, so I don't like using this thing and going, what did it say? Going, the config file. So config and then roots. That's one way you can open it. Or you can press Command P and just type in roots. And that's the way I like to do things. So we're not going to do it their way. So here they say we can set the root to the cars index. Yeah, so let me just show what this is saying real quick before we actually do it. So come back down here. I'm just going to Rails S to start my server. Here we've got cars. Right now this is localhost / cars. Now if I were to remove cars, then we're going to the root index. So right now it just has this default page. And so that's cool. But what we want to do is set it so that the root page, if you just go to the localhost, goes to the cars index. So the way that we do that is we go root cars index. And what does this mean, right? Why is it saying cars index? Well, if we were to go, so what it is this is the controller, and then this is the method. And so we should check out the cars controller by pressing Command P, and then go into the cars controller. If I drag the cars controller down, you can see that in the cars, there is a method called index, which gets us all the cars. And so that's what we're doing here. And so I just deleted out all that commented code. Actually, I'm going to leave that there for now. And now if we go over here, after saving our routes file, and we refresh the page, the routes forwards to the cars page. So that's what we just did here. Add changes to Git and GitHub. Okay, this is all just Heroku development stuff, which is kind of a pain because they might not be actually using this in the future. But we'll just go along with the program for now. And I think what this is going to do is, if we go down the end of the gem file, it's going to write that to the gem file. Fetching gem metadata, resolving, writing lock file to this. Okay. And one thing that we can use to actually see what happened by doing that is go to git status. And we see that the gem file has been updated. And if we go git diff, we can find out what happened to the gem file. And so, okay, that's just our changes, the SQL changes. Interesting. Didn't seem to do anything. So I don't really understand what this was. I think it's just a production thing from there. So yeah, now we can go git status. We see that we've got 3 files that we want to do. So we can go git add to add all of them, git status. They're all staged. Git commit updates for Heroku deployment. Cool. And now we can say git push. It says git push origin main, but for this, it won't matter. Now we want to push to Heroku. So we can say git push Heroku main. I think you could just do git push Heroku as well. Okay, this will send your app to you are trying to install Ruby 3.0, but the version is different. Nice. Gotta love these differences. You're trying to install Ruby 3.0 on Heroku-22. Ruby 3.0 is present in the following stacks, 18 and 20. Heroku recommends you use the latest supported Ruby version listed here. Okay. So what's the latest supported version? For more information on declared Ruby versions. So one place that you'll see the Ruby versions declared is in the gem file. I think it's at the top. So we're using 3.0. Oops. And our local machine is using 3.0. And it's saying, oh, nice. So it's completely confusing. Heroku run Rails DB migrate. Now we weren't able to push it up there, so we need to change this. You're trying to use on 3.22. Ruby 3.0 is present on the following stacks. Use the latest version of Ruby listed here. Let's do Heroku 22 Ruby version. This is where programming gets difficult, because you start to have incompatible things that you need to sort out on your own. This Odin project does not help us finish this. It just gives us the install instructions, and that's not good enough for us. So Heroku 22, it wants to use a Ruby version of 3.0.3. And so now let's see if we go Git Push Heroku main. We'll see if that allows us to do that. Okay. Still no. Did I save it? Oh, so I have to save the gem file, but then I have to do bundle install. Okay, because otherwise the lock file won't work. So your Ruby version is 3.0, but your gem file spec is 3.3. So now we have to say RVM, so switch the Ruby version, 3.0.3. Oh, I need to say use. I don't have it. RVM install Ruby 3.0.3. Okay, cool. Now this is going to take a while to install, so we'll just fast forward the video. But again, this is actually why I'm making this video, because it's interesting to go through this process. As a junior developer, early stage developer, this would be super complex, super confusing stuff. So hopefully this video is helpful. But installing new Ruby versions takes a while, so we'll just speed this one up. Okay, so we're back. What we can do is go RVM list to verify that we have Ruby 3.0.3. So we can use, now we need to use it. So RVM use 3.0.3. Cool. Now if we were to go to Ruby-V, we have Ruby 3.0.3, which is great. So now what we want to do is bundle our gem file. So we want to go bundle install. I think that was part of this instructions up here. Bundle install. Cool. And I'm not sure why it has to do all of them. It probably has to do with... But what does bundle install do? It takes your gem file and it turns it into this gemfile.lock, which is a long, interesting file that shows all the Ruby gems that are involved in making your project. So all Ruby on Rails apps, basically, unless they take these out specifically, have all of these different little pieces of software as small little additions to them to make it so that they work the way that they do. And so each one of these projects is, there's a whole experience and lifestyle of living out and understanding what all these are. A lot of them I understand, but that's because I've got a few years of experience. So you'll figure it out later. Don't worry about that for now. But the nice thing is now, if we go git status, we'll see that our gem file has been updated. And so here we're going to do a different commit. We've already committed that thing about uploading to deployment, but now we're going to say git add. We're going to say git commit -m. And what are we going to say? Update to Ruby 3.0.3 as per Heroku error message. Cool. And now we can do git push, which will push this up to our GitHub page. So if you were to go to the gem file here, let's see if we can outrun it. We can't. But now it's up to 3.0.3. So now we can say git push Heroku. And that should get us to the next step. That's what we were trying to do. And it didn't. It's present in the following stacks. You're trying to install Ruby 3.0.3 on Heroku. Ruby 3.0 is present on the following stacks. It doesn't want 3.0.3? What version of Ruby does Heroku-22 want? (3.1.0). Oh, great. Okay, so RVM install Ruby 3.1.0. RVM list. RVM. Oh, we have it already. Okay, so if you don't have that, you have to run this RVM use. Install 3.1.0. But we already have it, so we go RVM use 3.1.0. Cool. And now if we go Ruby -v, we'll see it was 3.1.0. So now we can change our project to be 3.1.0. If we save that, and then we go bundle install, now we should actually have a thing that fits with this Heroku situation, which I don't even think we're going to use in the long run anyway. So, but I'm going to go through this just to kind of show you guys how this works. Okay, so what happened here? Cool. It looks like that worked. So git status, we'll see that happened again. So git add them, git commit -m, change to Ruby 3.1.0, and git push. And you'll see right now, if we were to refresh here, we still have 3.0.3. So git push will change the way that we have it up here. If I were to refresh now, we see 3.1. And now if I go git push Heroku. Now hopefully this will deploy our Rails app to the server. Cool, it looks like it's working better this time. Nice. Okay, so basically it's running the exact same thing that we were doing locally on the server at the Heroku offices, wherever they are. And so it's going to take a little bit of time. Git push Heroku. This will send your app you created to Heroku. There will be a lot of output on your console. Wait for it to finish. So what we want to do now is migrate the database. Heroku run Rails DB. So we did that up here locally. We said Rails DB migrate, and so that would migrate the database on our local machine. That's kind of difficult to describe at the early stages of Rails development, but let alone it's just a part of the project. But then down here we're going to run Heroku run Rails DB migrate. So Heroku run Rails DB migrate. Rails DB migrate. That's the same thing that we ran locally, but we're commanding Heroku to run that command. So this is going to make changes to the Heroku server, which is essentially like cloud computing. You might see some strange content, but as long as you do not have an error, you have successfully deployed a Rails application. If you have an error, come to the chat room. Be sure to include the entire output of your terminal and ask the questions. And cool. So now what we should be able to do is run Heroku open, and we should see a window pop up here that has our cars. And if we were to go to cars, okay, and you're probably thinking, why are my cars not there? I already put them there. Well, they're not there because we're using a different database. Whereas here, if we were to run Rails S, we have our local host. That still has our cars. But in our production app has a different server. It has a Postgres server that's hooked up with there. So here we could do Audi, model A4, I don't know, year 2022. And we're still going to get, we're going to get this similar situation. We have our car situation and the root URL shows to there, but we have a different database. And so hopefully that makes sense. Cool. Now you're good to play around with it. Awesome. So that is that. That is deploying a Rails app to Heroku. And it makes sense. You can use these Heroku URLs free still. So you could still use this Heroku as a great way to practice. It's an easy deployment tool, and so therefore it makes sense to use for now. Yeah. So I'm just going to close all this stuff right now. But bottom line, we finished this one, so I'm going to mark this complete, and we'll move on to the next lesson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.